Thompson and Michael Coe. However, after extensive scientific, artistic, linguistic, and astronomical analysis of the text, it has proven to be authentic. And that astronomical analysis is at the heart of the book's content. Every culture actually develops some means by which to count, by which to calculate, and by which to keep track of the passage of time based on the movements and patterns of celestial objects. And thus, various calendrical systems have emerged, from lunar calendars to solar calendars to combined lunar-solar calendars, along with the 365-day solar calendar composed of 18 months of 20 days, with 5 leftover days being especially dangerous in the minds of Mesoamericans. They also kept a parallel 260-day ritual calendar. However, further astrological almanacs which track the cycles of the planets, especially the planet Venus, known as Chak-ek or No-ek, the great star, given its brilliance following the sun and the moon. Indeed, it was because of the precision of their observation traditions over hundreds of years that allowed the Maya to recognize that the morning and evening stars were in fact the same celestial object. Further, and just as important, was that the Maya recognized that the movements and positions of celestial objects did seem to have some kind of direct influence upon terrestrial events, something that many other people noticed. From the position of the sun and the changing of the seasons, the movement of the moon and its relationship to the tides, and so forth. Again, we now think of something like astrology as a pseudoscience, but people had really reasonable beliefs for this idea in their time period. In their case, the 4 phases of Venus, its appearance as morning and evening star, and its occultation in superior conjunction, that's where it passes behind the sun relative to us, and then inferior conjunction, where it passes between the sun and the earth, and thus, in both cases, it's invisible, in the later case because of the sun's intense luminosity. Well, these cases were reasons for especial dread. Thus, the beautiful Venus of Hellenistic astrology has in the Mayan system a governance set by a seemingly 4 grouped deities which were extremely frightening, which were harbingers of chaos and famine and pestilence and evil. Thus, knowing when these events in the Venusian cycle would occur, especially in relationship to the 260-day ritual calendar, was extremely important to Mesoamericans. Now, this isn't the place to go into all the intricacies of the Mayan calendrical system, from the long count to the lords of the night and everything in between. It's extremely fascinating and very complex, but it's worth noting that the 365-day and the 260-day calendars do share interlocking dates every 52 years, about the length of a human life. In the Aztec religious ecosystem, such an overlap was cause for extreme anxiety and was met with the new fire ceremony. Here, all the fires in the capital city of Tenochtitlan were extinguished, and the cultic statues were actually all destroyed lest they turn upon their once worshippers. On a hilltop, new fire was kindled atop the body of a captive at midnight on those overlapping dates. If successful, this fire was used to light all of the fires in the city, thus starting the 53-year timer all again. If the priest couldn't strike fire for whatever reason, the sun itself could be beset by rampaging star demons. I mean, the stakes were pretty high in this. The last time this ceremony is known to have been performed is in 1507, and shows just how such calendrical overlaps, transformations, and various cycle processions meant to the people of classical Mesoamerica. Indeed, the date of one's birth in the 260-day calendar was often just built into your very name. So again, these calendrical issues are tied to existential threats and identity in the Mesoamerican imaginary. But how did the 260-day calendar even work? A date in a given sequence of 1 to 13 is paired with one of 20 sequential day signs beginning 1 Emish. After running through that week of 13 days with the day signs, the count begins again at 1, but with the 14th sign in the process, 1 Ish, counting something like a month. The system cycles 13 by 13 through the day signs with different day sign permutations for 260 days until it restarts at 1 Emish. I'll include a link actually to the absolutely fantastic channel Ancient America's video if you want to learn more about this extremely complicated, wonderful calendrical system, and their channel is just fantastic for stuff about the indigenous people of these continents. But this 260-day calendar is important because the CMM is specifically interested in the grimly auspicious occurrence of specific phases of Venus during the 260-day calendar, especially at the start of 4 respective phases of Venus. But to appreciate the Mayan astrological genius here, we need to think a little bit about how Venus appears to us here on Earth. Given Venus's orbit around the Sun, it's a mere 225 days, and Venus's position relative to the Sun and the Earth, Venus never appears to stray far from the Sun itself. For the Maya, 236 Earth days, Venus appears as the morning star, rising prior to the Sun before passing then into superior conjunction invisibility, apparently disappearing behind the Sun for 90 days, then reappearing as the evening star, now seemingly chasing the Sun at sunset for another 250 days, before finally being hidden by the powerful luminosity of the Sun as Venus again vanishes between the Sun and the Earth, again for another 8 days during inferior conjunction. The start of any one of those 4 phases was of extreme dread to the composer of the CMM. Now, like all calendars, these numbers aren't exact. Well, at least for the 4 specific phases, the overall total of the phases is 583.92 days, which in the Mayan calculation was around 584 days, while the actual average synodic Venusian phases are actually 263 days for morning star visibility, 50 days for superior conjunction invisibility, 263 days for evening star visibility, and 8 days for inferior conjunction invisibility, respectively. Given the careful observations of the Maya, why this discrepancy between the Synodic times and the Mayan times? Well, scholars aren't sure, but the best guesses probably have to do with facilitating another thing that was very important for them, which was predicting lunar eclipses. Indeed, these cycles were well understood by the Maya. The 580-day Venus count is known from other Mayan codices, especially things like the Dresden Codex. In fact, these are recorded in specific 104-year cycles. But why 104 years? Remember how the Maya calculation of the Venus phases cycle is off by just 0.08 days? That's crazy impressive. That's just enough for the calendar to become conspicuously inaccurate, losing about 5 days in exactly 104 years, or 65 counts of the total Venus phase cycle, thus requiring calendrical recalculation. In fact, scholars believe that the CCM originally detailed specific auspicious Venusian dates in the 260 calendar count for exactly one 104-year period, and may have actually been interred with a ritual expert. The remains of mites associated with human decomposition have been found on the manuscript, specifically when the book itself had become inaccurate. It was stored with the person that used it in life and death. Now, this is all kind of abstract, so let's actually take a look at some specific pages of the CMM to get a better understanding of all of this. Each page of the manuscript represents the beginning of a specific Venusian phase with a list of 13 dates in the 260-day calendar upon which that specific initial phase would fall. There's then a complex illustration of what would occur on that date, and it's often frightening imagery of the divine assault on the human world. In addition to that, there are what scholars call ring numbers, which is the day-to-day count required to arrive at the subsequent Venusian phase. For instance, the ring number on page 1 of the CMM tells the reader to count forward 90 days through